Welcome to this very special edition of the KAJ Masterclass Live, the show which ensures that you profit from your time spent here with experts, either through their industry insights, information, or simply learning from them. And joining us live is Claus today. She is an entrepreneur, an author, and a coach, and we'll be talking to her about setting boundaries, better boundaries in life and relationships. Welcome to the show, Heather.
Thank you, AJ. I'm excited to talk with you.
Absolutely, absolutely. You are welcome to the show. You are welcome to India in this online form. And I'm sure a lot of people across the globe will benefit from what, as I said, we'll be talking about setting better boundaries in life and relationships. So, first, to understand from you, Heather, a lot of people must have heard it, but for a lot of people who want to understand it your way, what exactly are boundaries?
I'm so glad you asked because I think that a lot of people have one idea about boundaries, and that is boundaries are what we do not want. They are a stop sign or a no. And I look at boundaries slightly differently. For example, you mentioned I'm joining you in India right now. So if we think about the boundaries of our lives as our country's boundaries, right? So they include not only, this is the line and everything else is what I don't want or is not me, but inside of this line, these are our values, our ethics, our culture, how we use language, our religion, our beliefs, and so on and so forth. So everything inside of our boundaries are the things that we want to protect, we want more of in our lives. So to me, boundaries are the deliberate expression of personal power, shaping our lives and our identities consciously.
Absolutely, absolutely. How do I get about setting boundaries? Because if I may understand it, but others may not understand it, and those are important people in life. So, are boundaries a certain set of rules? What you write it on a piece of paper, put it on in wherever you are, in your office, in your cabin, or wherever, or is it how? And people are afraid a bit. Will it make me less likable? Will
Oh, yeah.
people, even my close people, my partner, anyone else close, will get confused by it? It will, create unnecessary tensions. So, how do I look at this boundary word, both in a personal life as well as personal relationships life, as well as in an office setting?
Wow, that is a big question. So let's break this down a little bit. The first thing I'd like to touch on is the idea that many of us are not raised to have good boundaries. So it is challenging to figure out how to set boundaries because when we are brought up, we are taught to get along, to do what others do, to fit in. And boundaries are really very individual. So, what works for me might not work for you, and vice versa. And I think that that's a really important point to consider. It's not your fault if you don't yet have good boundaries or understand them. So, then the second part of that is the idea that boundaries make us less attractive, less lovable, and less successful. And I will tell you, I believe the exact opposite is true. Yes, if you set certain boundaries, some people are not going to love that. And that's actually how it should be because not everyone is for everyone. But when we think about boundaries, again, as not just what we don't want, but also what we do want, what we prioritize, what we protect in our lives, what we give our resources to, what we save our resources for, then you can begin to understand that boundaries are an investment in ourselves And all of that boundaries money in the bank, so to speak, allows us to invest more fully and more consciously in the people, the things, and the projects that matter most to us. So if we look at it that way, we can say that our boundaries make us more lovable, more attractive, and more successful to the people and the projects that matter most to us.
Absolutely, absolutely, Heather. So to make it simple for a lot of people, who have not been trained into this, especially, is that what sort of boundaries should I have, and how
Ah,
do I set those boundaries? Where do I enforce? Do I have a police force with me who will go and enforce it for me?
yes, a police force. So, as far as should is not a word I tend to use because we are all individuals, right? So, I'm not going to should all over you, and I'm not going to allow you to should all over me. However, if we talk about this from the standpoint of what boundaries work for me, that's one of the things that I talk about in my book. The first step in creating, setting, and maintaining healthy boundaries is set it. And that means understanding where your boundaries are in your life right now. And there's 6 different types of boundaries. I talk about emotional boundaries, intellectual boundaries, physical boundaries, sexual boundaries, material boundaries, and time boundaries. Let's just take one boundary, for example, a material boundary, right? Because with a material boundary, we can speak not only to close personal relationships, but also to what we do in business, right? Or whatever. So a material boundary is focused in on stuff, money, and things, borrowing and lending. Or actually, you know what? I'm going to go with something completely different. Our cultures, my culture in America versus your culture in India. In America, we have a tendency to put a price tag on something, and that is the price, right? There is no deviation. If I'm willing to pay, $4.99, then I pay $4.99. In India, there tends to be more negotiation, right? Barter, bluffing, and, seeing who can get the best deal from the other, usually, but not always, in a mutually beneficial way, hopefully, right? So when our two cultures come together, we often clash because for us, if you offer us less for something that we have, put a price tag on, that feels insulting, right? Whereas to you, when we stand firm, we are refusing to engage in something that's a very deep cultural discourse for you. And it's a give and take. It's a way to feel out the other person and see, how you communicate together, how you work together in business and otherwise. So when it comes to material boundaries, how flexible are you when you're engaging with someone else on money? Are your beliefs about how money should be shared or handled or loaned rock solid? Do you use the same beliefs with every single person? Or do you have a more flexible viewpoint? And when it comes down to it, like, for example, how do you loan money and then expect to get it back? And is there a negotiation? Another thing that might happen is, you loan money and you say, okay, this is the payment date. And then somebody comes back and says, I can't do this. How about I do this? Again, these are boundaries. How do we interact with our stuff, money, and things, our material boundaries in our personal lives? And somebody might say, I never lend money to friends. If I have the money, I will give it to them, but I will not lend it because that's an expectation of getting it back. And I don't want to put that kind of pressure on our relationships. Now, I might say that. You might say something completely different. And that's where should comes in. What works for each of us is going to be unique to us.
Right, right. So how do I actually know, okay, my boundaries should be for my type of people, and how do I set the same boundaries or for different type of people or new type of people? Should I consider them or should I consider my needs?
You need to consider your needs. They need to be responsible for their needs in a relationship. And when you come together and those boundaries start bumping up against one another, that's how you're going to determine whether you are a good fit, right? So, for example, in my book, Take No Shit, with the 6 different types of boundaries, I break those down into smaller bits and pieces. And then I ask a lot of questions. There are probably over 150 questions in the book designed to help people figure out what works best for them, what boundaries they want to set in their lives. Also, I have an app on both Android and iOS called Take No asterisk 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 asterisk, and it's a daily boundaries journaling app. It will give you a different prompt every day about boundaries, and you can journal your thoughts and either keep them private to yourself or share them publicly with others on our feed and connect with people and talk about boundaries there.
Right, right. In terms of enforcing the boundaries,
Mhm.
if someone does not, and especially if it's a close friend or a partner or a business partner, if they don't follow those boundaries, how
Mhm.
do you make sure that uh, they listen to you and the situation is very cordial? It does not, there are not offense taken.
Well, you can't be sure that there will be no offense taken, and you can't force somebody to do something. I mean, that's not how I look at the philosophy of boundaries. However, once you've set your boundaries, there are 2, sometimes 4 other steps. So the other steps are, once you've set your boundaries, you say them, you communicate them to somebody. Then you review how that communication went, how it worked. You might have to repeat it, go into deeper conversation with them, and then you might have to change. Now, when you review it, if things went perfectly well, you don't need to repeat it or to change, right? Because things went perfectly well. However, if you review it and things did not go well, if they're still pushing up or trying to stomp those boundaries, then you might want to have a deeper conversation. You might like to look at ways that you can support them changing, or making space for your boundaries and needs. And then if things still don't work and you've, set yourself a period of time in order to give it a chance to change, you have the opportunity to change yourself, change what you're willing to accept, change how you react to it, change your relationship. There's so many different options. The goal in my book about boundaries is to not give your power away to others, to not try to force other people to change, to not try to control others, but simply to curate your own space, everything inside your boundaries. There's a saying, I think it's a Polish saying, but you might have heard it, not my monkeys, not my circus. Everything outside your boundaries, not your monkeys, not your circus. Everything inside your boundaries, these are my monkeys, these are my circus. This is what I have control over, although sometimes imperfectly, right? This is where I have my power, right? I cannot make you do anything. And honestly, nor do I want to, because I don't ever want you to try to make me do something.
Right, right. How do we look at it in a say social way? We
Mhm.
are all social beings and we need each other.
Yeah.
Only few people don't need others because they have either lots of money or lots of power. But
Or
a
need lots
person,
of solitude. There are some people who go out into the woods and never want to see another human. Bully for them. That's not who we're talking to.
absolutely, absolutely. But they still need some boundaries, or the lion or the tiger will come and eat them. So those are physical
Those are
boundaries, and those needs to be very strong. So coming back to, we need people around, and not normally, even if they are not so great people from our perspective, we still need know that we might need their help,
sure.
because it such is life. How do I make ensure or calibrate both the aspects, that my boundary needs are also met, and I also meet that the need of their ego does not get hurt, and I'm able to keep that communication channel open, because I might need them at any point in time.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, that's getting into a really deep topic, which is one of the reasons that, I set two sections, the say it and the repeat it section, talking about the communication. And actually, interestingly enough, my next big book that I'm working on right now is actually about communication. Actions speak louder than words, or do they? How we miscommunicate and kill our relationships with talking. And the idea there is that aside from the words that come out of our mouths, there is so much more to communication, right? And the words that come out of our mouths matter a whole lot. For example, exformation. So we've all heard of information, right? These are the things that come to us from the outside. Exformation is inside our heads. What definitions and associations do we have with words? Right? So if I ask 20 people in a room, and I've done this before when I've taught, to define love, I get 24 different answers. Everybody defines it slightly differently. So knowing that when we communicate, that we may not be speaking exactly the same language. You and I are both speaking English, but we have different associations with these words. So one of the most important things is going into the conversation in a non-confrontational way. So one of the things that I tell people never to say when correcting somebody or setting a boundary is, "That's my boundary." Because that immediately puts people on the defensive, like they've done something wrong, right? And another thing is, when you know that you have very specific boundaries, the world just went through coronavirus, right? And many people have come out the other side less inclined to be physically close or touching people they don't know, right? So let's imagine the scenario: somebody who does not want to touch. Maybe they have a social issue. Maybe they have physical sensitivities. Maybe they just don't like it, right? Planning ahead and saying, when they're about to meet somebody in a business situation or in a social situation, planning ahead and being able to say something along the lines, when somebody goes in for a shake or goes in for a hug, standing back and putting hands up and saying, "Thank you so much. It is lovely to meet you. I prefer not to hug," or "I prefer not to shake." Whatever it is that your language or preferences are, planning that out ahead of time so that you are not offering offense, like, "Oh my God, don't touch me." Right? Or, even something like, if they're going in for a shake, say, "How about an elbow bump? Let's keep each other safe," or whatever it is. There are so many different ways to do it. And if you plan things ahead of time, you can find ways to not only do it compassionately and kindly, but with consideration for different types of people in different situations.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, when is your book coming out, and is there something else people should know about this? Who is this book for? People, the solitude kinds, or the people who are living very much in the society?
Yeah, not for the solitude kinds, although they might find it interesting just as a quirky read. So my book is out. It is available on Amazon and in all the different Amazons out there. It is currently in English and it is in digital format. I am working on the audio and print formats right now. It is called Take No Shit, and it is for anyone who wants to have better boundaries in their lives, who wants to make sure and make more space and prioritize for the things that are important to them, who wants to get to know themselves better, and by extension, all of that, who wants to create more authentic relationships. Because that's really what the book is about, building better boundaries for our relationships. And that can be work, family, friends, even, like intimate relationships. But the focus is on people who want to interact with other people in the best, most authentic ways possible.
Absolutely, absolutely. And those who want to, learn more about this, professionally be engaged with you, what's the best way for them to do so?
My.curiouser.life. You will find access to my book, to my workshop, to my app, to my one-on-one coaching. And I'm about to start work on a couple of other projects, and people can, find out about those there. I've got one coming up about communication, one about breaking up. I've got a project with Briar Harvey and the Neurodiversity Media Network, where we're going to be talking about dating for the neurospicy. And of course, I've got my communication book coming up. So my.curiouser.life is the best way to find not only all of that, but also when pieces like this air, I post those on the site as well. So people can learn about what I'm talking about from the different perspectives of people like you, AJ.
Wonderful, wonderful. With this, it's a wrap on this very special edition of the KAJ Masterclass Live. Thank you so much indeed for joining us.